knew that there was a God. Growing up, God was used as a weapon in the house. So we never went to church. I didn't know anything about like Bible verses and praying and stuff like that. But I knew if you lie, you're going to go to hell.
So anyway, continue.
So the night that I was introduced to it, somebody had Evelyn for the night. I'm not sure. At this point, Wendy, my biological mom, was back in my life.
Okay.
She had moved into the place next door to me, was kind of helping take care of Evelyn. That relationship was decent at the time. And so it might have been her that had Evelyn. It might have been my mom, Pam, that had Evelyn. But I just know that she wasn't there that night. And I was purposefully looking to get messed up. And, I was, of course, just like thinking weed or alcohol, and so I went to my upstairs neighbor's house and walked in and was like, hey, what are you guys doing? And they were smoking something that I had never seen before. And I asked them what it was, and they told me it was speed. Now, in my super naiveness, I had no idea that speed was meth. I knew that meth was a big reason why Wendy wasn't a part of my life when I was younger. I knew that meth and heroin were her drugs of choice, and that's a big part of why she wasn't a part of my life. So I really feel like that one word difference, speed and meth, made the whole difference that night. Because had they said meth, I might have been like, oh no, you know what I mean?
Said speed.
They said speed. No idea. No idea what it was. And I was like, let me try it. And it was like the perfect drug at the wrong time, or the wrong drug at the perfect time. I don't know how to say it, but it was, it just instantly became my getaway from everything that I'd ever been through, from the stuff that we had just gone through. It just consumed me and blocked all that stuff out. And so it took me a little while to like really dive deep into an addiction. I'd probably say about 6 months. And it started with like, I'd use it here, and then maybe like a month later, I would use it again. And then it became like on the weekends, and then weekends turned into Monday through Tuesday, and then Monday through Thursday, and then Monday through Sunday. And
it was just, it's probably started off like, 1 or 2 times a day, and then it started to go way more than 1 or 2 times a day.
Yep. So it quickly turned into an addiction, but like I said, it was just the perfect escape. I wasn't being a very good mom at the time. In fact, Wendy had, she was renting a house, and I ended up moving into the downstairs of the house, and Evelyn had a room upstairs with her. And I went out with some friends one night and didn't go back. I don't know why. I do know why. I knew that had I gone back in the morning, I would have been in trouble for being out all night. And so I didn't want to face being in trouble for being out all night. So I shut my phone off and didn't turn it on, and literally like disappeared. Like missing persons report out for me, completely disappeared, didn't talk to anybody, never contacted my family, nothing, for about 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they had no clue.
No clue.
You were alive, what you were doing.
Nothing.
For 6 months.
Yeah, I went out for 6 months. Yeah, and
all because you were scared to go home that one night?
And then, I ended up meeting up with the right or wrong people, however you want to say it. At the time, it seemed right. People that I just got pulled into that world with those drugs and those people, and completely turned my back. I mean, on Evelyn and everything. I missed out on like some of the best years of her life because of my drug addiction. Those cute years, like, looking at Addie and trying to understand what she's saying. Like I missed that. I missed that time with Evelyn because of my addiction. Through my addiction, it was pretty brief. It was about 2 years off and on because I caught some charges really quick.
Okay.
And so when I was in jail, I wasn't using, but when I was out, I was.
Yeah.
But through the course of 2 years, I caught felony charges for distribution. And then I had gotten pregnant. And so this is probably the one thing, like if I could go back and do differently, or if somebody asked me if I have a regret, or and it's better now because I've done a lot of step work with it. I've done a lot of praying with God over it. But I did have like a later term abortion during my addiction. And it was the most traumatic thing I've ever been through. I had to fly out of state. I had never flown out of state by myself. I was all by myself. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have money.
Of course, you were off the grid. No one even knew you were alive.
At this point, I can't remember. I think I had reconnected a little bit at this point.
Okay.
But I went down to Seattle and I was all by myself, and I went in for the procedure and woke up halfway through it and was literally the worst thing I've ever done in my life, and probably one of the most traumatic. And for me to say that's one of the most traumatic things I've been through in my life after everything I've been through in my life, that is saying dramatic. A lot. Yeah. As soon as I left the clinic in Seattle, my flight was right away, and I got on the airplane still loopy, and flew back up here and slept it off in the airport up here for a little. I don't even know how I got on the right flight and got home.
Did no one stop you?
No.
Seriously?
No, they don't. This is people that work in that field. I don't think that they have empathy when they do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not like I can blame them. It's, you know what I mean? So I don't know. Not to say that they don't. The people that I interacted with while I was going through that were not empathetic at all. It was like, here, boom, done. You made this choice. These are your consequences. Okay, get on the plane, go home, bye.
Yeah.
Nothing, no follow-up, no nothing afterwards. So
that's a sad thing, not to go down a rabbit hole that you hear about these abortions. That everyone's like, these women have no regrets doing it. When a lot of women that I know that had an abortion like you, they have regrets.
Yeah.
There is no, I don't have regrets aborting my child. No, they're like, I have regrets. I shouldn't have ever done that. So I'm sorry that
it's, it's all a part of what made me who I am today. And there's actually, so towards the end of my active addiction, I could see little pieces. I was introduced to Narcotics Anonymous while I was in jail and kind of followed it a little, but it's so much easier to go hang out with those old people, you know what I mean, than it is to work the hard path of getting better and rebuilding relationships with my family and finding a safe place to stay. That all takes so much work to get there. It was so much easier to pick up the phone and go hang out with these people who I could go stay at their house, not worry about anything and get high and just forget about.
Now, Ryan's still in jail.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? I just want to clarify that. While all this is happening, Evelyn's with someone.
She's with my biological mother.
And then Ryan's in prison.
Yes.
Okay. That way we're still knowing, Ryan isn't. He'll come back, but he's not quite back.
He'll come back quite a bit later. Yeah, we're still quite a ways away from. I had to grow up a little bit before God let me bring him back.
Well, that's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing.
Yeah. So towards the end of my addiction, I was here and there trying to do the right thing. There was one point where I was clean because I wasn't doing meth, but I was still smoking weed. But weed wasn't my problem. Meth was my problem. Weed wasn't my problem. It's totally fine. It was totally fine. At least that's what I told myself until I went to go pick up some weed from my meth dealer and ended up using meth. You know what I mean? So it's just
that's not how clean this works.
And so this whole time I'm on probation, and my probation officer was like, Melissa, come in the morning. I was like, okay. I go in, I take a UA. The UA pops hot for everything.
Of course.
For everything. Stuff that I didn't even know. I didn't even know what a benzo was. You know what I mean?
I have no idea what benzo is.
Never done heroin or other opiates. Never smoked crack. I don't know. But that was what I tried to argue with them at the PO's office. I was like, I don't even know what half this stuff is, and I've never done the other half. The only stuff I should be hot for are meth and weed. And so my PO was like, okay, are you willing to sign this piece of paper that says that? And I was like, yeah. So I signed the piece of paper that says, I should be hot for amphetamines and I should be hot for marijuana, and that's it. And I was so proud to sign this piece of paper because this other stuff shouldn't be on there. And he's like, okay, stand up and put your hands behind your back. And I was like, what? No, but I told you the truth. That's honest. And he's like, yeah, but I told you if you popped hot again, you're going. So he took me in. And then this was the only time I've ever been bailed out. friend of mine came and bailed me out. And I instantly went on the run. So while I was on the run, I found out that I was pregnant again. And my addiction during this time, like, I don't even want to try to downplay it, but I wasn't using meth that much. I was smoking a lot of weed, no drinking. And only every once in a while using meth. I was aware that I was pregnant. And at moments of clarity through my addiction, I realized that I was pregnant. And then at other moments, I was selfish and didn't care and just cared about myself and what I felt like I needed. And so there was some use during the pregnancy. And there at the very end, my adopted mom, she called me and she said, Melissa, she said, last night at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, my probation officer and several cops showed up to her house.
What?
Looking for me. They had a warrant, so she had to let them in the house. And they went in, and her husband at the time was asleep, and the cops went in and shone the light on his face and were looking for me. And this was probably the first time that I realized that what I was doing was affecting other people. It was a slap in the face. So it was no longer me running and hiding and my life that was being affected. It was the first time that I had like the slap in the face that what I was doing was affecting other people and people that I love very much. You know, my mom, Pam, has been my rock forever.
Yeah.
And
knowing Pam, she probably said this all, I'm here to tell you this just because I love you.
Yeah. Yeah. She never through my addiction, you know, and something that was really the contrast between her and Wendy. Wendy wasn't a part of my life because of her drug addiction and things that she was doing when I was younger. But to Wendy, I was this piece of crap. Right. And she put me down constantly about being an addict and the things that I was doing. And she just made me feel like so worthless because of it. And Pam never did anything but love me through it. She never enabled me. I would call her and be like, "Hey, Mom, can I get $50 so I can go do what is that? A drug assessment so I can get into treatment?" She's like, "Yeah, sure. Let me know where it's at, and I'll call them and I'll pay for it." I'm like, "Oh, never mind."
She's like, I ain't no dummy here.
No. She would never do anything to enable me. But she was always there for me and loved me and you know, cared for me throughout the whole thing.
Nice.
So towards the end after that phone call from her, I made the decision I was going to make an appointment and go in and get a drug. So this was my thinking, right? Okay. I heard that if I got into treatment, that my probation officer couldn't come arrest me because of HIPAA.
I don't think that's
not how it works. That's not how it works. But, you know, when you're doing drugs, your brain's not really in the right place to think logically. And when somebody tells you that that's the way it is, it sounds like a really good idea. Yeah. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to go get this drug assessment. And because I'm pregnant, I'll be put at the top of the list to get into a treatment center. Okay. And so I was like, I'm going to go get this drug assessment. They're going to put me in treatment. And then my probation officer can't come arrest me. I'm going to call him and tell him that I'm in treatment. And he's just going to let me do treatment and come out and have another chance. No.
Not how it works.
So when I went in and I filled out the paperwork for the drug assessment and I turned it in, the lady there called my probation officer in front of me while I was standing there. And she let him know the date and time of my drug assessment. And so I spent the whole day before the assessment wondering if I was really going to go in. I knew he was going to be there. Mm-hmm. I knew he was going to come. Absolutely. I never made him chase me before. We had a pretty good relationship as far as a probation officer goes. I was always very honest with him about what I was doing and using and whatever. And, so I knew he was going to be there. But I went anyway, still thinking that if I just got the assessment done, if I could get the assessment done before I go to jail, because once you're in jail, it takes forever to get that drug assessment. So I was like, I just need to get it done before I go.
Okay.
So I went into the assessment and we're in the first 5 minutes of it. And he walked in, knocked on the door and walked into the assessment. And he's like, "Let's go." And I was like, and I just felt this like huge sense of relief.
Okay.
It's done. It's done. I don't have to run anymore. I don't have to hide anymore. It was the hugest sense of relief when he grabbed me and put me in the back of the car. So I, went in on a probation violation, and thank goodness I did, because the last couple months of that pregnancy, I had the clarity of mind. I had started talking to God again. And I had the clarity to try to find out what was best for my son. And then, randomly, I had one of the other ladies come up to me, and she told me about this adoption lawyer that she had and how amazing the experience was for her. She was in the faith-based program out there. And so she gave me the lawyer's number, and I got in touch with her and ended up finding an amazing family for my son.
That's awesome.
So I feel like, had it not been my first experience with the abortion, then I would have done that with the second. You know what I mean? It could have been like, if it was an easy experience the first time, I probably would have done that the second time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because it was so traumatic that time, I decided to make a different decision for my son and find a family that would raise and love him and take care of him. And, at this point, being in there, like, I knew that I wanted differently for my life, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to accomplish it.
Okay.
And my main goal was getting back to Evelyn. And so I wanted to make sure that I gave my son a better start in life than what I could give him at that time. Even getting out, had I stayed clean, it still would have been forever before I would have been able to provide any kind of life for him that was worthy. So, anyways, I found an amazing family for him. They live in Utah. He's happy and healthy and 12 years old.
Nice.
Yeah.
Has Evelyn ever met him?
Nope. So it's an open adoption. So every once in a while, I'll get updates. I don't really push it.
Right. If he wants to
think
know
about
who you are,
him.
he can reach out to you.
Yep.
And everything.
We celebrate his birthday. We'll go and let some balloons off and tell him happy birthday, or have something small just to, think about him on his birthday. But other than that, I just I gave that situation to God, and God will take care of it. And when and if he wants to come and find me, all my information is there, and I'll be open to it. And if he's angry with me, then I'll take that. And if he's happy to see me, then I'll take that.
Right,
and you know what I mean? All that matters to me is that I know he is very, very loved where he is.
That's good.
Very, very loved where he is. So yeah. So I had him while I was in custody, which I don't suggest having a baby while you're in the Department of Corrections custody, because they handcuff you and foot cuff you to the bed.
That
Yeah,
sound
no,
pleasant.
it's not. It's really not. So it wasn't a pleasant experience, but the family came. I got to meet them.
Okay.
I got to meet them while I was in the hospital for a few days, got to spend a few days with him. And then they came back and visited me at the jail before they flew back out to stay with him. They had to stay up here for like 10 days after he was born.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it was nice. I mean, they got to kind of know you and know him. Were you clean?
Yes.
By that time?
Yep.
So
I stopped using the day I turned myself in. So my clean date is February 4th, 2010.
Okay.
Yep. So, and I haven't used since then.
So you didn't really take the steps per se. You realize my life is messing up.
At that point, I was still in custody, and so if you get paranoid when you're using drugs outside of jail, I can't imagine how paranoid you would be using them in jail.
Some
and I know people do, but it's not anything like I just don't think that it would be an enjoyable experience. So I didn't. So because I was in custody, I didn't. Also because I was pregnant and clear-minded and not thinking about just myself, I didn't use for that part of the pregnancy. So I was clean at that point. And then right after he was born, I ended up transferring into a treatment facility.
Okay.
I completed a 90-day program and graduated on my birthday in 2004.
Yeah.
Yep. That was a good birthday present to myself. And so for me, I feel like what treatment did for me was gave me a buffer in between getting out of jail. And it's just a buffer, because any other time I'd get out of jail, if I called my family, they'd be like, yeah, let me know when you changed. And then it's like, well, it's just easier to call these people. So that time in treatment gave me time to be able to work on myself and then come up with a safe plan for when I got out so that I wouldn't turn back to the people that I used with. I was able to start rebuilding relationships with my family. I was able to start seeing Evelyn, So I got out. and Wendy had Evelyn, which was difficult.
Yeah.
Just because like you give her any bit of power and control and she's just going to run
She
with
wants
it.
it all.
She's just going to run with it.
Yeah.
And I can understand to an extent her wanting to protect Evelyn. And I think maybe if I had done anything differently, I would have thought further ahead and like dropped her off at my other mom's house before I disappeared. Yeah. So that she wasn't raised in the same environment that I was raised in,
Right.
you know, in the same toxicity that I was raised in. Now I'm here putting Evelyn in that same situation. So, yeah. So one of the times I was in jail is when I got the picture that I mentioned in the beginning of the interview,
Okay.
with the Matthew 17:21.
Now Ryan's still in prison.
Ryan's still in prison.
So he
Yep.
sent from his prison you a letter in your prison with the verse to it. So he's in Christianity. Somewhere in there, you don't really know.
Somewhere in there. Because I've mentioned the letter and he was like, oh, my sister sent that to me with the Bible verse on it. So I don't know if he wrote the Bible verse on it or his sister wrote it on the picture and he sent me the picture. Okay. Either way, that verse came into my life.
Yeah.
And it started, you know, and then when I was using, of course, I would drift away from Christ.
Of course.
And then when I'd get clean, I'd be like, oh, hey, there you are. Good to see you.
I miss you a little bit, guy.
Yeah. But I started working 12-step program, and through the 12-step program, you know, it teaches you about building a relationship with a higher power. It's very open though. It's you can kind of pick your own. You'd be a doorknob if you wanted it to. It just has to be something that's more powerful than yourself.
Okay.
And so the reason in recovery that they leave it open is because a lot of times when we get to recovery, we're so broken that it's hard. Like for me, I spent a lot of my life being angry at God. I knew that there was a God. Growing up, God was used as a weapon in the house. So we never went to church. You know, I didn't know anything about like Bible verses and praying and stuff like that. But I knew if you lie, you're going to go to hell. And so
don't lie.
Yeah. God was used as a weapon in situations like that. And that's all that I knew of God. And then it got to one point in my life where I was just like, why would you keep doing these things to me? Like I've lived such a hard life and I've been through so much stuff. And why would you keep doing all these things to me? That when people go through stuff like that, it's a little bit harder for us to come into recovery and build a relationship with a higher power. And God is the foundation of that higher power, but we got to let people figure out their own way there. And because we're going to scare them out of recovery if we just start talking about God.
Yeah.
We're going to scare them off.
Because they have the same reaction you did to it. Yeah. God's up there with a baseball bat. Yeah. Do something wrong.
Well, look at all the stuff that he did to me. How could, you know what I mean? Yeah, why am I supposed to turn to him now kind of a thing?
Yeah.
And so that really kind of helped with me anyways. You know, just being able to come in and figure out how to have my own relationship with God and not one that, you know, was right or wrong or dictated by a church, you know. I told you guys last week about the experience that I had walking into a church and I was like, I don't belong here.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, just coming into my own faith and so God's been with me through a lot. I remember probably one of the most profound moments in the beginning of my recovery. So in step 1, we work out of a workbook. And in step 1, there's a question that says, is there anything that you've heard in recovery that you don't believe? And I was like, yeah, I don't think that I could forgive my dad. So backtrack a little bit. So Ryan going to jail, my dad has a piece of something to do with that. Okay. And so from that point on, like, I just absolutely hated him. Yeah. I hate that he did. I put all the blame for everything that happened that night on him.
The person I love is in prison.
Yes. Yep. And so I put all of that on him. And so I just carried this hatred with me for so long over him. And I told my sponsor at the time, I was like, yeah, I don't think that I could forgive my dad for what he did. And she was like, is your higher power God? And I said, yes. And she's like, can't God do anything? And I said, yes. And she's like, why can't he do this? And so she told me, she's like, every morning when you wake up, I want you to pray for the willingness to forgive, not to forgive, but the willingness to forgive. She said, and anytime you think about it through the day, pray for the willingness to forgive. And I was like, okay. And she's like, when you go to bed at night, pray for the willingness to forgive. She said, do this for 2 weeks. I did it for 2 weeks. And I woke up one morning and the hatred and bitterness was gone. I still don't have a desire to have a relationship with him, but I'm not carrying that hatred and bitterness around with me anymore. And so for me, that was like, there is something.
The forgiveness is there.
There is something to this. It does work. Like when I put my trust and faith in God, and this is, you know what I mean? So I feel like that was God's way of coming down and being like, come on, girl. Like, I'm tired of beating your head against the wall. Let's go. Come on. I told you, let's go.
I forgive you so that you can forgive others.
Yes.
It's essentially what God was showing you. I forgave you so that you can forgive others, no matter what wrong they've done.
Okay.
Noise going on.
It sounded like rain or something. So, and the true test of that was a couple weeks after that happened, Ryan ended up getting sentenced, and he got a very heavy sentence. And while I was there at that hearing, I felt every emotion in the world except for hatred towards my father. And so that showed me that I really had found that forgiveness for him.
Yeah.
So that was probably like the hook, line, and sinker, get me in, kind of move for God. And then, for a while, I just grew in my recovery, started building a career for myself, working with dogs, building a life, was dating guys that were nothing like Ryan, and I shouldn't have even tried. So we'll fast forward a little bit and kind of get to like the meat, like what I feel has beyond a shadow of a doubt put God front and center in my life. So just in, 2000, he came home 2018. Yep. So 2017, I was dating this guy, and we got married. And in the same year, I filed for divorce because that was just awful. I mean, it was fine before we got married. Otherwise, I wouldn't have married him. And then we got married, and then it turned very awful, very, very fast. And so
the same person, huh?
It was the same person. He just took his mask off.
Oh.
The same person. He just took his mask off. I don't think that he was any different from day one to the last day. It's just that he wasn't trying to hide it anymore. Mm-hmm. He liked to sleep around with everything on Craigslist. So it's not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny. Anyways, it was bad. It was awful.
You're laughing because it's funny to you that the mistake that you made.
It was pretty bad. So I filed for divorce from him. I owned a doggy daycare at this time, was working hard, taking care of Evelyn. But I was working like 13 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
December 4th, 2017, I was leaving a Narcotics Anonymous meeting and lost consciousness in the parking lot. I don't remember anything for like a very long stretch of time. But my friend was walking through the parking lot with me. She thought that I was having a seizure, and she called 911. And literally the only reason I'm alive today, God made all this happen.
Yeah.
I was about to be in my car driving down the highway minutes later. So I lost consciousness in the parking lot. They called 911. There's literally a fire station at the end of the road from where we were. Wow. So it took them 4 minutes to get to me. And I was in VFib, cardiac arrest. So basically dead. I was done.
You were dead.
I was dead. And went to the hospital and got put on life support. And, even the doctors, I got baptized the day before. Don't let me forget that part.
Your story.
So let me backtrack. It's just so much. There's so much. So let me backtrack a couple of days. So I remember I was going to Heart of the City at the time, and we were sitting in, and they were doing baptisms that day. And it was basically like, come on up, we'll baptize you. You know what I mean? I've already been baptized. I've already been saved. And so I was sitting there, and I was like, I don't need to go get baptized. I've already been baptized.
God, I'm good. You're good. I'm good. We're all good.
How many times we got to do the same thing? But the pastor at the time was talking about washing away our burdens. Mm-hmm. And I was carrying such a heavy load at that time. I just filed for divorce. and so I was really carrying a lot of heavy stuff with me in that moment. And when he talked about washing away our burdens, not necessarily like washing away our sins or, being saved or reborn or, because that's in my mind what the baptism does. But when he started talking about like washing away our burdens, the next thing I knew, I was getting up and walking up to the baptism tub. And, I got baptized. I don't remember it. I remember little bits and pieces of it because the next day I had a cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
And my first downtime was 5 to 6 minutes. And so typically after 6 minutes, they consider you brain dead. And so I was really on the verge there, even to the point where the doctors are like, we're just amazed that she's alive. Like there's no reason, God was definitely watching over me. And even doctors who tend to be more scientific based and not go, on the faith side of things, were telling people like that probably saved her life, that she got baptized the day before. And so I was on life support for 4 days, in the hospital for 10. And I got out of the hospital, and it took me a couple months to recover. I was like, 10-minute Tom. Have you watched 50 First Dates? And it's like 10 seconds Tom. He's like, hi, my name is Tom. Hi, my name is Tom. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And then a few minutes later, I'm like, hey, what's going on?
By the way, that movie makes me cry. Kind of, almost makes me cry.
Really? Which part?
All of it. Because the way he has to interact with the girl he's trying to date.
It's so cute. He makes her fall in love with him again every day.
That's what makes the emotions come up to me. And it's just like, oh, man, he really loves her. Just to do that. Sorry, sidetrack.
Nope, it's okay. I'll get sidetracked with you. So I get out of the hospital, and when I tried to go back to work for the doggy daycare that I owned, it was probably like a month or two later, and I went in and worked for like a week, and I was like, I can't do this. I physically am not the same. I ended up being really sick. I had a heart condition that flared up with the cardiac arrest, and I was having a lot of palpitations, irregular heart rates. I felt like I was 70 or 80, living in I think I was 30 at the time, 29 or 30 at the time. And so, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so I made the decision to sell the business. I was going to take the money from selling the business, and me and Evelyn were going to move down to Arizona because I have family down there. So I was like, okay, before I do any of this, I have to let Ryan know what's going on. Ryan knew that I got married. He was very supportive of it. He's like, okay, I told you to go out and find, what makes you happy in life, because at this point we didn't think that he was ever going to get out. He's like, okay, go do, he's very supportive as long as me and Evelyn were happy and safe and taken care of. Right. So he knew that I got married, and he knew that I had filed for divorce because he called to talk to Evelyn on her birthday, and I was just bawling on the phone, telling what was going on. But he didn't know about any of the health stuff. And so I wrote him this letter, and I was like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what happened with my health. I'm okay. I mean, I wasn't, but I didn't want him to freak out because I was like, hey, I died, but I'm back. And then in the letter, I explained to him that I was going to sell the business and that I wanted to move down to Arizona with Evelyn. And I waited like 2 weeks because I figured the letter would have gotten to him by then. And I brought Evelyn out to see him.
Okay.
And, we walked in, and anytime this whole 10, 11, almost 12 years that he was in, if I was dating somebody, I would not go see him because I would feel like I was cheating on whoever I was dating because I've always been madly in love with him.
Right.
And so, I just see him and I'm like, oh, I love him. But he hadn't gotten the letter yet. And so I had to sit there in this visit where we were supposed to discuss the things that were in the letter and tell him the things that were in the letter. I was like, oh, by the way, I died. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, and we're moving. And he's like, what?
No, but you're like, didn't you know this in my letter? What letter?
Yeah, he's like, no, I didn't get the letter. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I even tried to wait long enough that, because they get them and then they hold on to them and read them or whatever, photocopy letters, whatever.
Yeah. It makes sense. It's a protocol.
Yeah. So anyway, so I told him about all that. We finished the visit with Evelyn and we left. And then I was like, I'm going to go see him again. Because when I see him, I just fall all in love with him again. Yes, like that. And so, I went out to see him like the next day or within the next couple of days, maybe a week later, something like that. And at the end of that visit, I kissed him. which you're not supposed to do.
No
But I did it.
touch.
No.
No touch.
No, they are contact. You can hug.
Oh.
You can hug,
So
but
it's
you're
not
not supposed to kiss.
It's not as strict as they show on TV, huh?
No. Well, it just depends on which jail you go to.
Oh, okay.
Some of them you have the glass in between you, but where he was, it was contact visit and we could hug and stuff like that.
No kiss.
No. What?
Hey, you love the guy. I mean,
What? And so I think it's.
You do this.
No, I don't even think they caught it, or I don't. Maybe I just did it on the right shift, and those guards didn't care. I don't know. But then I didn't go visit him again, and I was waiting for him to write a letter so that I could figure out how he felt about that kiss, because so much had gone on. Our relationship, I wasn't great in our relationship when we were younger. I was in and out of his life, the whole time that he was in there through my addiction.
Yeah.
I had done he always knew about the things that I did during my addiction, the abortion, the adoption. Like, I always talked to him about these things. And so he knew. And so I didn't know how he felt about me at that point when I kissed him. So I'm just sitting there like every day checking the mail, waiting for a letter from him. And the letter came in and it was good. And so I started going to see him almost every day.
Oh.
And so then we decided, backtrack a little bit. In 2014 or 15, his conviction got overturned.
Okay.
So now we're back on a pretrial basis rather than the sentencing that he had. So he's no longer sentenced to what he was, and he's working on a new trial. Okay. Which made him eligible to be bailed out.
Okay.
Because that's an important part.
But he's still in prison, though.
Well, yeah, he had $1 million cash bail.
Yeah.
At that time.
That's what I'm saying.
He was just going to sit there because I don't have $1 million.
Because, like, you think of sentencing, you automatically think when you get arrested, you automatically are sentenced. You're automatically going to prison. But that's not how you will literally sit in prison until you are sentenced. It's pretrial status. Yeah. And then afterwards, you're sentenced. So he went from sentenced back to pretrial status. Okay. And that's just, I had to go back and tell that part because it's important for what's coming up. So I was going to visit him every day, and I was still talking about moving down to Arizona, getting ready to sell the doggy daycare. The decision to do that was already there. And I was like, why don't we do a bail hearing? Why don't we do a bail hearing and see if we can't get you home before? And then if we can't get you home, then Evelyn and I will go move down to Arizona. But let's get you a bail hearing and see. And, he was really reluctant about it, but I did the footwork, found the ankle monitor company, job, got everything lined up, and then had the money from the sale of the business. And so then we did the bail hearing. Mm-hmm. And the judge knew how much money I had. His lawyer had told the judge how much money we had to put up for his bail. And so the judge knew what was available, and the judge granted his bail at that point. So leading up to that point, so from my cardiac arrest to the time that the judge granted that bail, that very moment, I was in a very bad place with God. I was in a very bad place. I didn't understand. I changed my life. I was a good person. I did good things. I followed his path as much as possible. Nobody's perfect, but for the most part, I was living a Christian life and doing good things. And I didn't understand the divorce, why something like that happened, and then getting sick, and then having to sell my business. And I literally was so angry with God. Like, it wasn't that I had turned my back on him, but my friends in recovery were very faith-based too. And I was like, don't talk recovery to me. Don't talk God to me. I don't want to hear any of it. And just like, shut it. I was like, nope, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. And I remember bartering with him. I was like, okay, God, I could understand if you put me through all this that I've been through in this past year, if it's what led to him coming home. You're not supposed to barter with God, I don't think. I don't think you're supposed to make deals with God. Somebody somewhere told me I'm not supposed to do that. I can't remember who, but they told me I'm not supposed to do that. You make deals with God. But I promise you, he'll come through on his end.
Yeah,
okay?
But I was like, I was so angry, and it was like, literally the only thing I could think that would make all of this suffering in the last year make sense is if it was to get Ryan home. Like, I had to get sick to sell the business, to have the money to put it down, to bring him home.
Mhm.
I had to be sick and be planning to move in order to go visit him and have this conversation and spark this relationship back up with him.
It's kind of like the story of Joseph. The story of Joseph, right? Where so essentially his dad is Abraham.
Mhm.
He has him. Okay. He's his favorite son. Joseph
Oh,
is
yes, I know the
Abraham's
story, yeah.
favorite son. And they throw him in a they throw him in a pit. His brothers want to kill him. They don't kill him. They send him to Egypt. Long story short, he ends up being second in power. And during a famine, his brothers come and say, "Hey, they don't know it's his brother, okay?" And they're like, "We've come to get food." Joseph knows these are his brothers. They don't know. And so at the second time they come, he's like, no. You don't understand. All this suffering I did, all the suffering that happened to me was to get me to the point where I am at right now, to save lives.
Yep.
All the suffering that happened to you was to get you to the point where you were, to be in a good relationship, maybe not with God, okay, but you were back connected with your family. You loved Evelyn. You probably at this moment loved Pam. Still a rough relationship with probably your biological parents, but I understand that. But you were building. So that's what I'm saying. It's Joseph. You went through all this. Maybe not.
That's why I'm like, okay, I've learned enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Learned enough. Thank you. Right where you need me. We can stop now. But it was really, it was a really profound moment for me. Just like the one that I had talked about earlier about the forgiveness for my father, that same overwhelming feeling, like as soon as the judge granted the bail, that was the amount that we had to get him home, and he was able to come home. I remember just hitting my knees and being like, everything makes sense. Everything makes sense. And this was like, I still carry this with me today. It's probably, my relationship with God is so much easier and smoother, but he probably is like, thank goodness she's not a headache anymore. This girl's finally listening to me. She's finally listening. Because at this point, it's like, I will no longer question God's will for me. Why am I going through this? Why is this happening to me? Why this? Why that? Why this? Why that? Why do I have this person in my life? Why, you know what I mean? I will no longer ever question anything like that again. When stuff comes into my life and stuff's happening, I'm like, cool, let's do it. Because God didn't put me. I went through all that stuff to get to that point to bring Ryan home. And it just all made so much sense why it took each one of those pieces. And people are still like, well, we could have done without this part. And I'm like, no. Any of those pieces, because I was still in a spot where like God was trying to tell me stuff, and I would be like, I hear you, but I'm still going to do it how I want, And so God knows me better than I know myself. And he knew that he really just that whole year just needed to beat my head against the wall to get me to the part where I was. And it's been like a true testament and eye-opening for anybody in my life. Anybody that was around me at the time. You can't look at the series of events that happened that year and not believe in God or something, whether you want to call it God, I'm going to call it God because I know what it is.
Yeah.
But you can't look at the series of events and not see the divine intervention in that. And so yeah, anybody that was like a half believer, non-believer, maybe believer in my life at that time was firm believer after watching all that stuff happen.
Because, and like you say, all boils down to had you not died.
Yeah.
Had you not died, you literally wouldn't be the person you are today.
Yep.
I mean, all that stuff before happened, but had you not died, and really it
was like God just needed to put the little cherry on top, and that was it. Like he had built me from the mess and the trauma that I'd been through my whole life, and he built me into a good person. I was a good person before I died, and he was like, we just need to add the cherry on top.
Yeah.
I'll pass on the sprinkles. I mean, if he wants me to have sprinkles, I guess we'll do it. But I'll just like, we're good. We've had enough.
The thing is you literally died to your old self.
Yeah.
Like literally, not spiritually you did, but physically, you died to your old self.
Yep.
Which I'm gonna tell you right now. I've known you now for like 3 years. About 3 years. It's been 3 years now.
Almost. Yep.
Almost 3 years now. And I'm gonna tell you, I wouldn't. If I had known you back then, I probably would be like you. I wouldn't probably recognize you. That's because I wouldn't. I wouldn't be like, that's not Melissa.
Yeah. Nope.
That's not Melissa.
Not the same person I was. I mean, even a year ago.
Right. So, well.
So no more crazy wild life events in between then and now. You know, Ryan came home. We got married.
Okay.
So it's kind of funny because I got married the year before and filed for divorce the year before. The divorce was finalized in January of that year, and I married Ryan in August of that year. So I'm sometimes I'm a little careful with who and what I tell Esther, because then I just don't. Sometimes I don't feel like explaining it all to everybody, but whatever. Like as soon as he came home, I was like, "No, we're getting married. You're mine forever. I went through all this to get you home, so you're mine forever." Put a ring on it.
He proposed to you?
He did. No, he proposed to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you made that statement. And you're like, I proposed to him because I'm like,
We knew it was coming though. We had started talking about marriage before he even came home, and then after he came home, and I'd let him know, the people that ask for permission. And so he went around and asked the people for permission, and just people who were really instrumental in my life. My mom, Pam. Let me clarify. I stopped talking to Wendy years ago.
Yeah.
Years ago. That one was really hard because, like I said in the beginning, I think people have a natural desire to have those relationships with their biological parents. And I really tried with Wendy. I remember in early recovery, my first set of steps, I went to read my amends letter to her. Mind you, this is somebody who's just like, it's been a toxic relationship since day one. Never has she ever been any kind of a mother to me or pleasant, or you know what I mean? And I read my amends letter to her, and she looked at me and she said, "It's about time." And I was like, "Oh, okay." What? Well, I guess when we do a men's letter, we're not expecting anything from anybody. It was just to get stuff off my chest and own up to my behavior. So that's all. Thanks. But yeah, I mean, so it took me a little while after that, but I finally just came to the decision with her that it was just better if I just
cut ties.
Yep.
Yeah. Some people believe that once you forgive, that you can automatically go back. And it's just like,
that's the definition of insanity.
Like, you can forgive them.
Yeah.
But that does not mean you have to put yourself back in that situation.
That's one of my favorite parts about forgiveness. And when I have people that come into recovery and I'm sponsoring them, and I tell them, I'm like, forgiveness isn't for them. Forgiveness is for us. Like, we have to find a way to forgive so that we don't carry this around. God has forgiven us so that we can forgive others. But forgiveness doesn't mean come on back into my life and create the same destruction so that I can forgive you again, so I can forgive you again, so I can forgive you again.
That's not how it works.
That's not how it works. It's like, no, I forgive you, love you from a distance.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yep.
Bye. Yeah. So I haven't spoken to either of my biological parents for quite some time.
Well,
but that's okay because Pam's amazing.
Pam is amazing. I've met her only once.
You shot the video of me asking her to adopt me.
The adoption video.
Yep.
Which was the first thing I've ever actually truly recorded. So,
yeah, you did good though.
Thank you. So, well, Melissa, thank you for that testimony. Thank you that you showed us that your past doesn't have to define your future.
That's right.
Your past doesn't have to make it where I'm always going to perpetually end up in this situation. With that being said, the one thing I will want to say to everyone, if you are ever in an addiction or anything like that, get help. Seek help, whether it's with God, but you can go to God like you did, but you need to seek help from people. I mean,
seek help from like-minded people.
Yeah.
That's 12-step programs. Sometimes treatment's difficult unless the counselors are recovering addicts, because we don't want to sit there and talk about our addiction to somebody who's reading about it from a book. It's easier for us.
You want that personal.
We want
connection.
that relation.
Yeah.
You know, in addiction, like, okay, you understand when I talk about my character defects and, you know,
Yeah, they can
selfish and
sympathize.
self-centered and compulsive and all the characteristics that go into addiction. We want somebody that understands that.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you are struggling, reach out. NAAA is the way to go. It's what I did.
It worked.
Yeah. It's not the only way, but it is what I did.
It worked. So anyway, thank you, Melissa. Thank you for, if you're still watching on this one, which I probably know you are. And as always, live a life with Christ. You'll have a good day.